get to be a reader for you today, and I'm going to read a special book called Little Red Cowboy Hat. And I wanted to show you a picture of me as a little girl when I was a cowgirl. And so this story makes me think and helps me remember me as a little girl. It's written by Susan Lowell, who's a lady who lives in Tucson. And she wrote lots of other books, which I'll tell you about at the end. Once upon a time, far away in the wilds of the West, there lived a little girl with red hair. Her hair was a fine color, somewhere between firecracker and new pennies. And to top it off, her grandmother gave her a bright red cowboy hat. You can see it on the back of her head. So every day, people called her Little Red Cowboy Hat, or Little Red for short. One day her mother said, "Little Red, your grandma's sick in bed. You ride on over there and take her this loaf of homemade bread and a jar of cactus jam." "Yes, ma'am," said Little Red, who loved to visit her grandmother. "Now, don't you dilly-dally along the way," warned her mother. "No, ma'am," said Little Red, "and be careful." Her mother said, "It's rat snake season." "Yes, ma'am." So Little Red put on her cowboy hat, and she saddled her buckskin pony, and she packed her loaf of bread and jar of cactus jelly in her saddlebags, and then she set off to her grandma's ranch several miles away. First, she rode down into the deep canyon. Clickety-clunk clash, clickety-clunk clash, went the pony's feet, striking sparks from all the rocks. You can see how deep she's going. Next, she rode up onto the wide mesa where golden poppies and blue lupin blossomed in the grass. "Oh, my grandma loves flowers," thought Little Red. "I'll just stop and pick a few for her." As she was picking different wild flowers, she heard her pony give a snort. "Whoa, Buck," said Little Red, turning around. "Is it a snake?" she asked. "Do you see a snake anywhere there?" "I don't see a snake, but I see someone that's like a snake." Then she saw the wolf. "Howdy, little girl." He kind of sidled up to where Little Red Cowboy Hat was picking flowers. He wore a hat 3 shades blacker than a locomotive. "Hi," said Little Red. The wolf stood between her and her pony. She didn't want to talk to him, but she had been raised to be polite. "What's your name, honey girl?" he asked, and he came a little bit closer to her than she liked. Little Red Cowboy Hat," she answered reluctantly, but she'd been raised to tell the truth. "Red," said the wolf. A creepy feeling ran up her backbone and tingled in the roots of her hair. "Red as in ketchup?" he asked, "or red as in blood?" She didn't answer. He was much too close and she could count the teeth in his smile. "Where are you going, sugar?" he asked. Why don't you take a little ride with me?" Just then, the pony whinnied and reared up on his hind legs. "Whoa, Buck!" cried Little Red. The wolf leaped away from Buck's hard hooves, and Little Red seized the reins and jumped safely onto the saddle. "Off to Grandma's house!" she shouted as she galloped away. Still haven't seen any snakes, even though it's snake season. Now, when Little Red reached her grandma's ranch, she didn't hear a single sound except the windmill creaking, shriek, squeak. The chickens didn't even cluck. Usually Grandma was outside, doctoring a cow or mixing cement, but now nothing moved except 3 buzzards circling high in the sky. Poor Grandma, thought Little Red, and she tied Buck to the hitching post and tippy-toed into the ranch house. It was so quiet, as quiet as a tree full of owls. "Grandma," she called softly. She saw a big lump in her grandma's bed. The lacy edge of Grandma's shower cap peeked out above the patchwork quilt. "I brought you some bread and jelly, Grandma," said Little Red. "Well, thank you, honey girl," said the muffled voice. Thump. What was that noise outside? Little Red stiffened. Something was wrong. "Grandma, is that you?" she asked. "Well, of course it is, sweetie." "Well, I can't see you," said Little Red suspiciously. The lump moved, and deep down in the bedclothes, a strange dark eye glittered. "Shoot," thought Little Red. "Grandma must be really sick." "What big eyes you have, Grandma," she said. "The better to see you with, Pumpkin," said the voice. Kaplunk came the noise again from outside. The quilt fell away from a long, hairy muzzle. Now Little Red Cowboy Hat knew perfectly well that this was not her grandma. But where was Grandma? So she decided to string the wolf along until she found out. So she went on bravely. "What a big nose you have, Grandma." "Oh, the better to smell you with, Dumpling," said the figure in the bed. Thump, thump. And what big teeth you have, Grandma." "The better to eat you with, Angel Girl." And the wolf sat up straight in bed and grabbed Little Red Cowboy Hat. "Ow!" she screamed. "Quiet, you delicious morsel," he snarled, licking his chops. "Oh, no, you don't," a familiar voice rang out. "Get your paws off of her, you varmint." And there was Little Red Cowboy Hat's grandma with an axe axe in her hand. She'd been chopping wood outside. The wolf dropped Little Red like a hot potato and made a break for the window. "Are you all right, Red?" called Grandma. "Yes, ma'am." The wolf tripped over his nightgown, and then he got stuck in the window, his tail waving helplessly behind him. Meanwhile, Grandma went and snatched her shotgun from off the mantle. "Pow! Take that, you lowlife Lobo," she shouted. "Come on, Red." Little Red jumped onto Buck and twirled her lasso in the air. Together they chased the wolf down the road. "Tut-tut-tut-tut," cried the chickens. "No, no," cried the cattle. "Breaking into my house," puffed Grandma. "Pow, kabam, pow, pow. Wearing my clothes, getting fleas in my bed. Messing with my granddaughter. Swish, boom. You look mighty good as a rug, Mr. Wolf," said Grandma. Later, back at the ranch, Little Red Cowboy Hat and her grandmother sat down to eat their bread and cactus jelly. "Now, Red, have you learned a lesson today?" asked Grandma. "Yep, a girl's gotta stick up for herself," said Little Red. Her windblown hair glowed in the light of the setting sun. It was a fine color, somewhere between autumn leaves and red-hot chili peppers. And Grandma smiled as she smoothed down the hair. "That yellow-bellied, snake-blooded, skunk-eyed, rancid son of a parallelogram," she said, "this time he picked on the wrong grandma. And they never had any trouble with wolves around her ranch again." So, I hope you like this story. I think it's kind of a fun story, and I bet you can tell me what fairy tale it comes from. Now, if you like this lady, her name is Susan Lowell, and she's written a couple other books you might know. Three Little Javelinas and The Tortoise and the Jackrabbit, all about fairy tales that happen in the desert, not in the forest. And if you have a library card, you might check for books called Fractured Fairy Tales that have other fairy tales that are a little different from what we're used to. Have a good day and keep reading.